Good morning. Please be seated. Thank you for being here this morning and for joining me and other members of my administration, including Commissioner of Finance Ann Hill Dawson and OMB Director Deborah Gottlieb. Last week, I called the 29th Legislature into special session on December 23rd to take up a set of measures that I propose as essential if we were to be able to operate our government. These measures sought to increase our revenues and give us the authority to borrow short-term to manage our cash flow while allowing us to work towards reducing our overall expenses in an orderly manner. After a day of political posturing, increased rhetoric, we saw senators do everything from large personal attacks against me and the administration officials to deflecting these realities as simply a management issue, to outrageous requests such as access to government bank codes. In the end, we had a final vote of 11 in the negative and 1 in the affirmative for the bill sent down to them. What we saw was a complete lack of leadership and sensitivity to our community when it needed it most, with one member going so far as to say they didn't want to be there. Through the presentation of the financial team led by Commissioner Dawson, I laid out the financial reality and the economic facts. We are almost out of cash, and we cannot continue to issue checks without money in the bank to cover the checks. Not only will the checks bounce, but the act of issuing checks is unlawful in and of itself. They flatly rejected those measures and at the same time offered no solutions of their own, just as if they failed to come up with any ideas other than the 8% pay cut and the early retirement incentive. And they now fear that the 8% pay cut will be struck down by the court as having been beyond their authority to pass in the first place. My lawyers and theirs are arguing that the pay cut is permissible, but if it is ruled that it is not, our problems only get worse because of the 29th Legislature's failure to deal with the financial and budgetary crisis they have been ducking right along. But make no mistake, what the senators decided last Friday when they took the positions that they took and when they voted as they did was quite simple and understood by them and by all who listened to the proceedings. What they did was decide that the dismissal of government workers was the best solution. By declining to proceed with a reasonable set of actions, they have left us no choice but to take some steps that I have worked hard to avoid over the last 3 years, which is to discontinue certain programs and dismiss government workers. They said, and they said it quite clearly, Governor, you do it. We don't want to do it. We don't want to be any more visible than we are. And what we will do is blame you once you've done it. Over the last 3 years, we have borrowed monies necessary to avoid what we're being forced to do today. And we've been criticized for taking this approach. We executed agreements to assure a new and larger revenue stream, and we were vilified for giving up too much, when in fact we were receiving nothing before. We have cut operating expenses, limited our hiring, we raised revenues, and we continue to nurture existing capital projects while ensuring some stability of operations and employment. The December 23rd decision will have a real impact on families, on children, on caregivers, and on our community, and their ability to meet their daily needs. It will also have far-reaching impacts on the private sector that depends on the demand created by public employees for goods and services provided by private firms. I disagree on this course of action being the best for our community, but I have no choice but to implement the collective will of the senators. To that end, I have taken the following actions. On Tuesday, I directed Kenneth Herman, the Director of Personnel, to complete the preparation of the list of those employees of the government whose tasks and functions have been deemed by the heads of the departments and agencies where they serve as not being essential. Today, OMB Director Deborah Gottlieb will be issuing letters to executive branch departments and agencies noting the amount of reductions required. These agencies will also include the Waste Management Authority, the University of the Virgin Islands, Housing Finance Authority, the Economic Development Authority, Boards of Education, the Board of Elections, WTJX Television, Schneider Regional Medical Center, and the Governor Juan F. Louis Hospital. On December 30th, letters will be delivered to 143 temporary, per diem, and part-time employees who will be informed of their dismissal, with the 30th their last day of work, but they will be placed on administrative leave so they can be paid for 2 weeks. On January 5th, an additional 350 employee dismissal letters will be sent out informing those employees of their termination. I have been very clear that this is not the course of action that I wish to pursue, and my actions over the years have reflected this. But I've also been just as clear that the lack of action by the 29th legislature requires these steps. We have no other choice given to us at this point, and all should understand that these are but the initial steps. Further actions, including an additional employee dismissals, will be required, and the combined impact will be dramatic. I am sure there will be those who will now rush out to the talk show microphones and issue press releases to cry foul and look to cast blame on me. And while they may think that this is productive, I know it not to be, as I provided them with a pathway and outlined the consequences of no action on their part. They will claim that I rushed to judgment, that I could have waited. But we were very clear that by the end of January, we would have depleted our cash resources. And therefore, in the absence of their action, we had to make adjustments. We are past the point of political games, just as we are past the point of half measures when it comes to our required actions. What my members of the financial team presented last Friday was not new, but it was consistent. We have spoken countless times about the state of our territory's finances, as well about the steps needed to be taken in order to continue to lead us through these times. And we have outlined the current cash in the context of larger financial issues, well known to the senators and to our community. The pension system's unfunded liability, the incremental cost of waste disposal and healthcare reform, and the solvency of the Workman Compensation Program. Given the fact that our latest set of proposals was summarily rejected by the 29th legislature, and they offered none of their own, makes a difficult choice now the only choice. We must continue to function as a government, but we must also continue to function within our means. The dismissal actions I've laid out today have officially gone into effect and mark our initial steps. While I will continue to work together with any and all who wish to come to the table with real solutions for our territory, the time for talk and half measures are over. And frankly, it is time for a little truth-telling and a lot less posturing and repetition of what is both wrong but also known to be wrong. Last Friday, Senator Neville James actually had the audacity to ask members of the financial team when we would start seeing money from Diageo. This from a senator who has shown absolutely zero support and has consistently voted against our historic agreement with the largest liquor company in the world, whose promise to build what now stands on St. Croix as the most modern and environmentally sound rum distillery in the world, was the sole basis for the borrowing that provided the cash for said senator's biweekly paycheck and every other government employee these past many months. It is also time for Senator O'Reilly to stop accusing our financial team of some nefarious behavior just because she cannot comprehend that it takes a number, when she takes a number from an audited financial statement prepared on an accrual basis, that number will be different than an interim cash number shown on a cash basis financial statement. There is something deeply troubling about those who see everything as some dark conspiracy designed somewhere for the sole purpose of misleading them or their cohorts simply because they do not understand the actual financial numbers behind the budgetary process. And it is time for everyone in the legislature to stop saying that they don't have the financial data or the information they need when they have access to all the reports needed to project and measure the financial condition of this government. I do not expect any of them to just go along with my scenario, but I expect them to offer their suggestions and projections. However, this type of interaction is sorely lacking. Therefore, they spend their time either criticizing my financial team or finding fault, while at the same time offering nothing from their perspective. And just so there's no mistake, everyone should know that the doctrine of separation of powers certainly does not extend to the legislature being entitled to access codes and passwords of the government's bank accounts. Not to mention that I find it hard to understand, in fact, hard to even comprehend, how anyone could possibly explain providing such information and access to whatever cash this government has at any given time to an entity whose own financial management discipline has been so clearly illustrated to be suspect and has also shown to be in complete disarray in the recently published Inspector General's audit. So for Senator Millen Young to talk about spin when all the financial team was trying to do was explain the financial situation and that having bank access codes is not a determinant to whether our proposals have merit is disheartening, to say the least. And it is time for Senator Russell to not hold out the false hope that the federal government will swoop in to save the day in order for us to make payroll in February. Senator Russell knows full well that I first called him on Friday before calling the special session to take him up on his offer to arrange a meeting with all 15 senators, and again on the following Monday, asking for a meeting with the 15 senators. He said he was unable to gather even those who were still in the territory, and that they did not wish to meet, and that he was canceling the tentative time we have set for a meeting. Now he says we need to meet, but his sense of urgency is such, and I quote, "After the festivities on St. Croix, after the last parade, we should all get together," including the delegate, whose contributions of late have not been to assist in identifying federal assistance, as Senator Russell is implying is available to the territory, but rather her suggestion that we locally are not capable to account for our projected revenues, but need a federally mandated chief financial officer whose sole purpose would be to tell us what revenue estimates we should be using for budgetary purposes. Those of us who made the decision to run for office and were fortunate enough to be successful have two primary responsibilities, in my opinion: to make decisions in the best interest of our community and not ourselves, and to work together as we make these decisions. We have watched on a national level the absence of this type of civility, this type of behavior that has led to inaction, which by itself is an action that hurts so many. The pockets of local self-interest are becoming too great and have a disastrous impact on us unless we refocus on the overall community. To my fellow elected officials, I repeat that we have to work together for the common good. To my friends in the private sector, I would suggest that it's time that they appreciate the extraordinary steps to keep our economy intact over these past 3 years when the private sector contracted here and across the nation. Those in the private sector cannot continue to believe that they can go over 20 years without a tax increase. To the union leadership, I would submit that we have made tremendous efforts to keep our government workers working and avoid this day. It is time that those leaders explain to their members that a decrease in government revenues can affect negotiated salary increases. And finally, it is time that taxpayers understand that not paying what they're supposed to only leads to those that need government help the most will not be getting it. I have acted, and I will continue to act. I regret that after all we have tried to do to save people's jobs, to maintain a level of stability in government programs and execution of operations, that has come to this point. But I know there's little else that I could do. I'm very concerned for every family that depends on their job or the assistance it provides, and for our businesses that depend on contract work and government purchases. We have permitted hotel resort projects in the work, strategies to implement alternative and renewable energy programs, installation of a broadband infrastructure, introduction of new air carriers to the territory, improved discussions with our cruise lines, plans to enhance our downtown areas, and an exciting project for Sports Coliseum in Frederickstead. It is truly unfortunate that the senators did not want to work with us to provide the bridge until those initiatives could take hold. Thank you for listening, and now I will entertain any questions.